All right, friends. So we're back, and I'm going to share with you another AI experiment. I have this idea for a big change I want to make to my website. And although I'm not planning to have AI do all of it, I am planning to have AI help me do a lot of it. And I thought it would be a good idea for me to record the experience of doing this. So let me tell you what I'm going to be doing. This site has long been my blog, my online home, and I use it for experimenting because I own it, so I'm more willing to do crazy things to it than I would be to something like a client site. This site was originally hosted on WordPress.com, so the hosted version of WordPress, for a long time. And then I moved it to Jekyll. This happened a few years ago. So Jekyll, if you're not familiar with it, is a static site generator. So it is a content management system, but rather than having the content live in a database as it does with a CMS like WordPress or Drupal, the content for this website lives in my computer in a directory in the form of markdown text files, which is really convenient because I can edit them with any text editor. And now that we have AI, I can easily pass blog posts, articles over to an AI because it's all plain text. Now, what this also means is that rather than be served dynamically as you would have with a system like WordPress or Drupal, the site is actually compiled once and then saved as a series of HTML files, which I then upload to a web server. Now, all of this happens automatically. I've set up a workflow using GitHub Actions. All that happens behind the scenes, and we're not going to get into that. But just suffice it to say that this is a CMS, but it's not a dynamic CMS. All right, so let me tell you what it is that we're doing. So if you go to my website, it talks a little bit about what I do. It says that my focus is AI, information architecture, and knowledge management. And then you'll notice that there's a section here with the latest. And one of the latest posts here is about a book that I read recently. So I'm going to click on this. So this is my reading notes on this book, Super Agency, by Reid Hoffman and Greg Beato. And this is basically a blog post. By default, Jekyll has two content types. It has posts, which is what we're looking at here. And posts are kind of like blog posts. They have a title and they have a date and they have a body, and they're structured by default to be presented as you would blog content, meaning you can easily render them in reverse chronological order. If you look at the URL here, you'll notice that there's a folder structure with the year, the month, the date. This is not how Jekyll works out of the box, but I wanted to mirror the structure that I had when this was on WordPress. But this is a very blog-like structure in that it places a lot of emphasis on the year, month, and date. If you're familiar with Jekyll, you'll see a few things here that are not standard. Like, for example, I have a call out here with an excerpt, and I have this little call out that calculates how long it takes the average person to read this. And these are all things that I've added over the years, but they're all built on top of this post content type. So that's one of the default content types that Jekyll provides out of the box. The other content type are pages. And pages are things like, they're more static, right? So for example, I have a page on my site called Books, which is where I have highlighted the books that I've written, and I have a few academic papers that I've that I've published. So those are the two basic content types that you have to work with when you work with Jekyll. There's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time on this site, which is I've been wanting to create a section of the site dedicated to these book notes. So I have been writing posts about the books that I've read for years. I think I have something like 70 posts of book notes. And the challenge with this is, well, first of all, it's really great, right? Like I've been able to create this content over time, and it's helped me reflect on what I've read and helped me make sense of the reading. So I don't want to diminish the usefulness of doing this as a blog. But I think that for someone who is coming to my website, it might be more useful to see all of the reading notes in its own page. Like, it would be really cool if this site could have a page called Reading Notes that aggregated all of these, what are currently called book notes posts. And again, these are posts. They're of the post content type. Jekyll provides a functionality called collections that I have not yet exploited. And my plan here is to create a new collection that is going to be called Reading. And the Reading collection is going to aggregate a new content type that are basically going to be reading notes. I think that in WordPress there's an equivalent concept. I think it's called something like custom post types or custom content types. But the gist of it is that you can define different metadata structures for collections. So I can create a collection for these reading notes, and I can define things like the publisher and the authors and all that stuff as part of the metadata. So if you look at this post here, like this is the current state. This is the blog post notes that I've published. What I've done consistently here is I've started every one of these posts with a little text string that includes the full title of the book, whereas this is my kind of working title that I use when publishing in my content management system. And then in this case, this book has two authors, Reid Hoffman and Greg Beato. It has a publisher, Authors Equity, and it has a year of publication. Currently, the way that I've been doing it is every time I write up one of these, this is part of the body. And what I want to do is I want to create this collection that includes the proper metadata structures for me to define things like the proper title, the authors of the book, the publisher, the year it was published. As you might imagine, that would allow us to do things that I can't currently do with this current structure, such as it would be really cool if the page that lists all of the reading notes allowed me to sort the books by the author or by the year of publication. I can't currently do that because, like I said, this current content, which should be metadata, is actually baked into the body of the post. The other piece of metadata that I'd like to include here, for this one we have to scroll all the way to the bottom. So invariably, these book note posts end with a little link for the user, the reader of my website, to be able to get this book. In this case, it's a link to Amazon. And I would like to move this to metadata as well. I don't want to focus this series on implementing the collection in Jekyll. That's not what this is about. So what I've done is I've already created the new collection, I've already defined a new template for this new content type, and I'm going to show you what I have in mind. I've already built it, and I've migrated one book. So this is the new template, and it's the book that we've been looking at, right? So first of all, notice that the title is much cleaner. And now I have this eyebrow that says reading notes and the title. I've made the little description here much larger so that it's kind of entices the reader. I've moved the metadata, so the full title, authors, publisher, etc., to the sidebar here. And I've created a generic kind of call to action button, which says get it now. And I've also included a thumbnail of the book. So this is new. The content that I've already created for those 70-something books in the site don't currently have thumbnails. So that's something that I'm going to have to somehow source as part of this project if I'm going to keep it. I might decide to not keep it. I think it adds a lot. I think that it makes it much more visually appealing to have the book cover here. So if we go to the bottom here, everything else is pretty similar. I have not implemented yet the subscribe to my newsletter bit here. I will do that. I just wanted to get the basics up and running. Notice that I've moved the publication date to the bottom. I don't want to distract the user by having this at the top. I also did not want to create the potential ambiguity, having the user potentially think that this was the publication date for the book, particularly in cases like this one where this book was published in 2025 and this post was published in 2025. So I've tried to make that clear by moving the post publication date at the bottom. I'm also planning to add a new metadata field that allows me to capture the last time that I touched this post. So the last time that I updated it. There are some of the books in the collection that I've revisited multiple times since I first published the post, but they're timestamped with the date when they were originally published because they were written as blog posts. And this new collection will allow me to be more flexible, to actually keep revisiting these over time. So these are not blog posts, they're more like permanent pages in my site that I can revisit as I revisit the books. Okay, so I've told you what the project is about, what we're trying to do. And one of the things that I'm going to do with this series is I'm looking to share with you some of the tools that I'm using to do this. And I am experimenting with a lot of different tools. So I'm using Claude, the Claude chat client and ChatGPT. I'm using Simon Willison's LLM tool. I'm using Claude Code for some things. I'm also using, in some cases, other tools. And in this case, I wanted to share with you one that is fairly esoteric. This is Emacs, which is a venerable text editor. It's more than a text editor. I think people would argue with me about whether it's a text editor, but I think of it as an extensible text editor. And because it's extensible, people build new functionality into it. And one of the functionalities that people have built into it is the ability to integrate large language models. I'm using an Emacs package here called GPT-EL. So I think of it as like GPTEL. I haven't heard how the author pronounces it, but I think I'll be calling it GPTEL throughout this video. But basically, what this does is it allows me to fire up a language model in the context where I'm editing the code that powers my CMS, my Jekyll instance. So I said that Jekyll is a static site generator, and the way that it works is there is a command line tool that rebuilds the site, and it does it from a series of static templates that are saved as HTML files on your computer. And that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at the template that renders the new reading collection for my website. I'm not going to go into detail into what this is. I will just say this is fairly standard HTML. Jekyll uses a templating language called Liquid, and that's what this is. And Liquid can, at build time, it can introduce variables based on metadata. So for example, this is a call out to the title metadata attribute in a blog post or a page in the site. So I can show you what the content page looks like for this super agency article that we were looking at. So let me call that up. So let me make the text a bit bigger here. So this is the post. This is what it looks like. It's saved as Markdown in my computer, and you'll recognize that all of this stuff down here is the body, right? But up at the very beginning of the file, we have this front matter in YAML format, and this is all metadata. And you'll notice that I have already added the metadata for the various pieces that I described when I talked about what we were doing here. So this is the title. The excerpt is what appears under the title, that big subtitle text. The title full is the full title of the book. The authors, this is, I think, interesting. So you can define arrays. So this book has more than one author. So they're listed as a list. There's the publisher, the year published, the cover image, which is saved as a file in a directory on my site. The get it link is the call to action there. You'll notice that I've changed from Amazon to the books page in the Simon & Schuster website, which is the publishing house that put this out. And this is a change that I'm planning to make with these pages as I do this migration. I'm going to clean up the links so that they point to a more canonical version of the book. Then below that, we have a few kind of Jekyll-specific metadata fields. So we have categories, which is an array, tags, which is an array, and then I'm using a plugin that allows me to redirect from the old version, the old URL for this page, to the new URL, and that's to keep things from breaking. So that's it. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling these. Go back to the template here. So this template, what it's doing is it's including within the HTML variables for those metadata properties that are defined in that site, and that's going to happen at build time. So it's like a compiler, right? It builds a thing and it creates HTML files. Now it's relatively simple with a simple variable like the title, right? Like there's only one title, and I know that every one of these pages is going to have a title. There are some pages that might be missing some metadata fields here, and I need to go back and check the 70 odd posts, but some of them might not have a year of publication, for example, or they might not have a publisher. Some of the older ones, I might not have included an author even. They initially they might not have a cover, right? Like an image for the cover. So this is a very minimal template. This is like my very first version. This is like, let's get it rolling. So this is not robust yet. And what I want to do in this session is I want to show you how I would go about tweaking the liquid code for this template to help make it a little bit more robust. And to do that, I'm going to use Claude. And the reason I'm going to use Claude is I've experimented with a bunch of different language models. I have found Claude to be the one that works best with code. I have on the left here my source code, and on the right here, you'll notice that this window is split in half. In Emacs parlance, these are called buffers. The buffer on the left here has the source code, and the buffer on the right here has running in it this package GPTel that I talked about earlier. And GPTel is really interesting. It's a front end to language models. And you can use language models that are hosted in the cloud through their API, which is what I'm doing here. Or you can use local language models running through something like Olama. To configure it, there's a menu command. So I can call GPTel menu. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of options down here. The options allow me to do things like set a system message. I can have it use tools or not, which we actually don't want. So if you notice here right now, it says that use tools is on. So I'm going to turn that off, and I do that. You'll notice here that it says -T is the command to toggle that. So I'm going to Command T, and it asks me, do I want to use tools? And I'm going to say no, disable it. And now it says use tools is off. But I'm going to leave everything else as is here. But the one thing that I do want to do here, and this is where where hopefully this is going to start becoming powerful, is I want to have Claude use the source code for my template as part of its context. And you'll notice that there's a command here under context called add buffer to context. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to type -B, and it asks me which of my currently open buffers do I want to add to my session with Claude, to the context of my session with Claude. So I'm going to add reading.html, which is the buffer that we have there on the left. So I've added that. You notice that the code now has a light blue background. So that's telling me that that bit of text is now being considered as part of the context that will get sent to Claude. So it also says here, you see context, one region in one buffer. I could, there's a command that lets me inspect what is in the context in case I want to take a look at what's there. I'm not going to bother with that right now, so I'm going to close this. And now I can type requests or prompts for Claude, much like I would if I was using the chatbot, but it's going to be using the text highlighted in light blue as part of the context in the backend. And I can test that by initiating our conversation by asking, what is this? And I press C, return, and Claude responds almost immediately. So it says, this is an HTML template for rendering reading notes, book reviews, or summaries on a website. It recognized that it's using Jekyll, and it is using the liquid templating language. That makes me very confident, right? Because that means that it has recognized what we're working with. So let's now very quickly try to make a minor change to this code. And I'm not going to have Claude modify the code itself. that makes me a little nervous, right? So, and I have used Claude Code, and I expect that at one point in this series, we are going to let Claude Code go nuts with my templates and stuff. By the way, I should have said this right at the beginning. Everything in my site is version controlled, and I highly recommend that if you're going to be doing anything like this, you keep backups of your stuff, right? Particularly if you're going to be using agentic AI like Claude Code. But for this session, I just want to illustrate how I could have Claude operate as a co-pilot in the context of the editor that I'm using to modify this website. So I know that it's looking at the right thing. I know that it's understood what it's looking at. So we're going to ask for a change, and I'll tell you what it is that we're going to be changing here. So we have this list right now. We have this array that renders the authors, and I would really like. So right now, this book has 2 authors, right? And if we go back and look at the code that generates that list, there's a fairly simple for next loop happening here. So I'm having Liquid pick up the array. So I'm saying, define an array called authors. So assigned to the array authors, whatever you find in page.authors. And that's the list. You remember the list in the metadata for the page, right? So after this, there's going to be an array with each entry in that list of page.authors. And this for next loop, what it's going to do is it's going to iterate over each item in that array, and it's going to render it within a fairly simple paragraph tag. Notice that I have like styling inline here. This is obviously not going to be there when this goes to production. I'll clean this up, right? Like I was just tweaking the look and feel. But the gist of it is, it's basically going through that array, and it is looking at each one of the authors, and it's rendering them in a list separated with a comma. So it is rendering each author, and then I have encased or enclosed within this unless conditional, unless it is at the last entry in the list, then render a comma and a space. And that's so that we can get this nice comma, right? So Reid Hoffman, comma, space, Greg Beato. If I were to, let's jump back to the post here. If I were to delete Greg Beato from the list of authors, so let me now re-render. Let me re-render this site. Takes a little bit because this is a largish site. It's about 12 seconds. Oh, 15. All right, so if I were to refresh this, you notice that now it only renders Reid Hoffman, and there's no comma and no space. That's the desired behavior, right? So I'm going to now, let's restore Mr. Beato to the list of authors. Now, that's the desired behavior. If there's more than one author, we want comma, space, separating them. The thing is, well, I should re-render this, right? So that we can look at it with the proper commas as well. While it does that, I'll describe the problem. The problem is that if we have 3 authors, we would want the first one, comma, the second one, comma, and the third one. So we want that and. If we have 2 authors, we would want the first one, no comma, and the second one, right? Like that's how a human being would write this. Right now, reload this. Right now, this reads a little like, someone was a little lazy with that template, right? Like it's like the first one, comma, the second one. So we want to have this actually say the first one and the second one in the case that there are two authors. In the case that there are more than two authors, we would want the first one, comma, the second one, comma, and the third one. I'm a big believer in the Oxford comma, so that's the format that I want. So that is the change that I want Claude to help with. Now let's see how we would go about this. So, okay, so I'm going to try to describe this for Claude. This template currently renders authors separated with a comma in cases where there is more than one author, and no comma when there is only one author. That's good, but we want it to be more nuanced. If there are only two authors, we'd want the list to be separated by and rather than a comma. Okay? So again, I'm working with the garage door open here. So like at this point, I'm wondering if I should just send this prompt now and see what Claude suggests, and then work on the case where there are more than two authors separately. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to avoid complications and start simple here by sticking to this relatively simple use case. So again, I'm going to do a Command C return, and Claude immediately responds with suggested source code. Let's examine this. Notice that it is clever enough to keep my styling in here. Okay, so let's examine this. So for author in authors, that's correct. So what it's doing here is there's a conditional looking for the length of the loop, right? So if the loop is greater than 1 and we're at the last one, oh, this is very clever. Oh my goodness. So it's actually, I haven't even asked it to do the Oxford comma thing, but it looks like this code already does it. Wow. I'm a little blown away. All right, let me try this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire thing, and I'm going to replace my code with the code that Claude has suggested. Let me clean this up a little bit so that it's nicer to read. Wow, I'm going to be blown away if this works. All right, let's rebuild it. So the behavior that I expect now is Reid Hoffman and Greg Beato. So there should be no comma. There should be the word and separated with spaces between them. Let's see. That's correct. All right. Fabulous. So let's now test the scenario where there are more than two authors. So I'm going to go back to the actual post, and I'm going to add a third author. I'm going to, in a fantasy world, John Cale is the third co-author here. So I'm going to rebuild this again. All right. Well, there you go. That looks good. There are spaces between the commas and the names, but it is doing the Oxford comma thing properly. Let me see what's going on with those spaces. And I see already what it is. So it's put the code here in separate lines. So that's not going to work. I'm just going to get rid of the white spaces here. I don't think I'm as efficient moving around in Emacs as other people. You would not know that I've been using it for so long. So what I've done here is I've eliminated all line breaks because I suspect that that's messing up the white space. Again, I'm doing this very much like I would if you weren't looking over my shoulder here. So this is all iterative, and I'm kind of learning as I go, right? All right, so let's see. Boom, there it is. Okay, so one last thing left to test here, which is what if this was just one author? I suspect this is going to work because, just looking at the code, I think that looks right. But let me just try it anyway for the sake of completion, and then we'll wrap up this video. All right. Yeah, so that's good. So no commas, no ands. So this is working as expected. So I'll, let me just revert this and eliminate John Cale and back to this thing. So this is this one way in which I'm using AI these days, which is in the past, I would have gone off and had to look at Stack Overflow or port through the documentation in the Jekyll website to learn the Liquid templating language. And I know enough programming concepts to understand things like for next loops and conditionals and things like that. But I'm unfamiliar with Liquid itself, right? So this is a really easy way for me to make a change very quickly to my site, and more importantly, to do it in the same environment where I'm actually doing the code, so that I don't have to be copying code back and forth between my code editor and a chatbot window. Should you get into Emacs? I don't know. It's a big, complicated tool, but I just have the muscle memory in it. And it's fabulous to have the flexibility to do this kind of thing. There are obviously similar features in other IDEs like Visual Studio Code. But this is one way that I'm using AI. I already have ideas for other videos that I can do around this. LLMs are going to be incredibly helpful in this project. In fact, I don't think I would take something like this on were it not for the fact that I am going to be using LLMs, just because of the fact that it's going to save me so much time. This is going to allow me to get a lot done that, again, would normally require someone like me who is not a software engineer. So it would have required someone like me to do a lot of reading and experimenting with environments that I'm not super familiar with. All right, I hope that was useful. I would love to know what you think in the comments below. Please, if you want to see more of these videos, do let me know and subscribe. I am going to record more videos in this series as I work through this little project. But I'd love to know what you would like to learn about, what you would like to see me cover. So if you have ideas for other things that you would like to see me work out in the open like this, leave them in the comments. All right, thanks.